So I've had just about enough of being able to see my create post form and the edit post form while not actually being logged in. This has been occurring because I've been logged in. So if I go to login and go to login as Jane Doe and I hit new post, well, this makes sense. But if I refresh the page and now I'm no longer logged in, well, we really shouldn't be seeing this page. So we can actually make it so that our users cannot see this page unless they're logged in. And one way we can do that that's pretty handy and convenient is by using router pipelines. And specifically, we can use an authorization step or an authorized step pipeline to make sure only users that we deem are authorized to see this page can actually see it. This is, if you're familiar with the concept of middleware, this is pretty similar, but this is, in the front-end vernacular, is a pipeline step. So let's go back to our code here. And there's a few ways we could implement this. What we're going to be doing is, since it's very router-centric, we're going to go to our app.js file. And let's go down to just look at our router, our configure router method here. And so what we're going to want to do is actually create an authorized step class. We could create it within this app.js file. So we already have this app class. We could go down to the bottom here and do an authorized step class here and add the logic that we need to here. But what I'm going to propose we do, actually, because I like kind of keeping it a little cleaner, is I might recommend that within our source directory, perhaps we create a new folder and we can just call that pipeline steps. And then within this pipeline steps folder, I will create a new file and I will save that as authorized step.js. And here we can go ahead and do the export class authorized step. And we can contain our logic here. And then all we need to do now is within our app.js file, we can go ahead and import that. So we could import the authorized step class from pipeline steps authorized step. Okay, great. So now we are pulling in this class into our app.js file. What we can then do is within configure router, we can add an authorized step using that class. So we can say config.add authorized step. And we can use the authorized step class that we've pulled in. Fantastic. And so now all we have to do is within these mapped routes here, we need to tell our router which ones we are going to need an authorized step to actually make sure people can't access unless they are indeed logged in. The way we do this is we can have, for each of these objects, we can have a settings property and then tell it that it needs to include that authorized step. So let's see, which one do we want to do first? Let's do the create post. If we look through our first three here, the default route, we don't need to be authorized to see that. The login route, we certainly don't need to be currently logged in to see that. The sign up route, we don't need to be logged in to see that. But yeah, when we get to the create post route, we don't want anybody to be able to see that form unless they're already logged in. So let's add a settings property here. And then within this object, we can say, yeah, the auth step is going to be true. And then what we're going to be doing is within our authorized step class, we are going to be kind of looking through all of these different routes and saying, okay, which one has a setting where the auth is true? And then we need to make sure that our authorization logic actually goes ahead and applies to that route. So let's take what we just added here. So this auth step setting. Let's also add it to our edit post route. And at least for now, I believe that's all we need to worry about. Everything else you can browse. You can go directly to posts and slugs without being logged in. You can browse our tags without being logged in. You can browse archives without being logged in. That all makes sense. So that's great. So we've set that up. And actually, this is really all we need to do within our router configuration here. But what we do need to do is go back over to our authorized step file here and finish setting this up. So something important is that the authorized step is always going to have a run method. So we'll have to have a run method. It needs to take navigation instruction. And that's basically the information that we're actually getting from our router here, our router configuration. And then also it takes the next parameter, and I'll explain that in a moment, but basically this is going to tell, conditionally based on logic that we have here, it's going to tell our application what to do, whether or not, it's allowed to go onto the page as requested, or if we're going to have to maybe reroute the user somewhere else. Okay, great. So within this run, and I'm just giving us extra space so we can see what's going on here. We need to now, well, for one, we can just say return next. I'm going to say that just to start with here, that if we just return next, then the application will just go on without actually doing anything. And I can test this out by just going to my application. So if I go back to my application, I hit login, and I type in perhaps Jane Doe, and I go here and I hit new post, I can still see the new post. If I refresh it, I'm no longer logged in, and yeah, I can still see the new post, because no matter what within my authorized step run method here, we're just returning next. We're going on to the next thing no matter what. Okay, so we know we're not going to want to just return an unaltered next state no matter what. We're going to want some condition that tells us first, if the user needs to be logged in, check for login, right? And then we might want to say, all right, if the user is not logged in, send them to the login page. So again, if I go back to my app.js, we've listed in two places that we need to be logged in. So the create post page and the edit post page, our user needs to be logged in to get there. So let's first create the logic to only apply this to this authorized step to the routes that we intend. So let's implement some logic that uses our past navigation instruction and says if we can find a setting where auth is true, then let's make sure that we apply this pipeline. So this logic might seem somewhat complex, but if you pick it apart, it's not that challenging. So we use the navigation instruction, and then we want to get all instructions, and then we just need one hit. So that's what the sum array function does. So if config settings.auth, then we want to check for login. And within this if statement is where we want to check for login. And if the user is not logged in, then we're going to send them to the login page. And this is really important because what this if statement does is it scopes down this authorized step to say, we want to make sure that we are only checking for login and redirecting users only when we know that we have a setting where the auth is necessary. Okay, great. So let's just test this out. I'm not going to actually check for the logic here. What I'm going to do is just assume that people aren't logged in so that we can see really what that looks like. So what I'm going to do is import redirect from our Aurelia router package, which will allow us to cancel our next and redirect the user to the login page. So let's import redirect from Aurelia router. And then what we can do is, here, I'm just gonna pretend login check fails. So yeah, we're just gonna automatically pretend that it fails just so we can understand what's going on. And so instead of returning next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually cancel that. And we will create a new redirect. And let's redirect people to our login page. And again, that's our named login route. So what we're saying is if anybody tries to access a page that needs authorization, we're just saying, okay, we don't think you're logged in, so let's redirect you to the login page. Let's see how that looks here. So I'm going to log in right now as Jane Doe. And let's just go ahead and click new post. And as I mentioned, when I click new post, we are going to go through this pipeline step. It's going to say, okay, I see that we have decided that the create post page requires authorization. Within my pipeline step, I say, okay, this requires authorization, but I'm assuming that the login check fails, and we're just going to redirect you to the login page. So if I click on new post, aha, it went ahead and said, okay, you're not logged in, you have to go to the login page. So that's exactly what we want, but we need to make sure that the user actually isn't logged in, because currently I'm Jane Doe, and so we actually should be able to see that create post page. So let's fix that up right now. All we have to do is here say, well, if something, then we need to cancel. So this something will mean not logged in. So how can we do that? Well, we know that we have our auth service. So if I go into our common services auth service, if I use dependency injection to inject this auth service, I can check this current user property. And if this current user property is set to null, then I know I'm not logged in. So let's import our dependency injection container. And let's additionally import our auth service. And we'll use dependency injection as mentioned. So let's inject our auth service. And this class can, of course, have a constructor where we set this.auth service. Great. And so, as mentioned, we can say if not this.auth service.current user, then we know our current user is not logged in. And therefore, we can redirect our user to the login page. Otherwise, hey, yeah, we're just going to the next step. So let's see how this works. I'm going to go to the application, and I'm going to go as Jane Doe, log in here. If I hit new post, okay, great. So it must know that I'm logged in. That's fantastic. But now if I give the page a refresh and it logs me out as Jane Doe, then we're really hoping that we won't see our create post form. Success. So that's awesome. That's something that's been bugging us for a little while. So we can now be pretty comfortable that as we refresh our page here and get logged out, well, yeah, we're not going to see that. And so let me log in again and try editing. So I'm going to view my second post. So I'll edit post. And now let's do a refresh again and see if I can see this. And I can't. This is great. So this is doing exactly what we want it to do, and with a fairly eloquent way of using an auth step kind of in its own file here and bringing it in and configuring our router somewhat minimally to make this happen. So we're pretty happy. We are not all the way there yet. I'll show you some cases where we might not be feeling that great. So one case, I'm going to log in as Jane Doe. And let me view this post by Nick. And I will, instead of, because there's no button here for me to edit because I'm not Nick, I'm Jane, I will just use the URL and say edit. Okay, so I can edit Nick's post. Well, if you think about it, of course I can, because all I did within this authorized step was to make sure that I was a logged in user of some sort. And this kind of makes sense because when you're in this authorized step, you really have no idea, as you're going to the edit page here, you really have no idea who edits this post. And in fact, that's a pretty common scenario, is that all you really have is a slug, and you have the slug/edit. And then once you kind of get to start seeing the view model for this edit page, then you can start saying, oh, well, this person is not who owns the post. What should we do? So let's go ahead and address this scenario currently. Let's go into our code base. And so I'm going to close down what we have currently. And I'm just going to open up our post folder and go to our edit HTML and edit JS. Really, I just need the JS, the view model. And so we have our activate lifecycle hook here, and we have this.post equal data.post. But perhaps first, check that the logged in user actually is the author of the post. Maybe we'll just say first check authorship. So we know that we have our author located in data.post.author. But yeah, we don't actually know who the current user is, so we can do this in the way that we've done this before, which is to import our auth service, common services auth service, use dependency injection, and of course include it in our constructor. Okay, so now we have the auth service, and so we can say, well, if this dot, or rather, if data.post.author is not equal to this.authService.currentUser, well, we've got a problem. So someone's trying to edit this post that probably should not be trying to edit this post. So in this case, what should we do? Well, we've got our router, so why don't we just use that? Let's use our router and just say this.router. Let's navigate to route. Let's send this user to the home page. You know, if they're trying to edit a post that they don't own for whatever reason, I mean, we don't have to assume malicious intent, but anyways, they're somewhere they shouldn't be, so let's just shunt them back to the home page, and you know, they get to try again. So let's see how this works. Let's go back to our application, and we will log in as Jane Doe. And we'll view the post by Nick Shalley, and we'll go to edit in our URL. Okay, great. And it threw us right back to the home page. So now it's saying, all right, sorry, you're not the person that should be able to edit this, so you're going somewhere else. Whereas in my second post, if I view this post and I click edit, it says, okay, you are the person who's supposed to be able to edit this, so we're going to let you carry on. Okay, so some other things that we might want to do here. Let's go ahead and log in as Jane Doe. And let's go to maybe my second post and hit edit post. So what happens if I click logout right now? Oh, okay, well this isn't good. So it did what we thought it would do. Well, it certainly logs us out of the application, as you can see on the sidebar, and you can see it in the header, but we still see the edit posts here, and that's not good. So we can actually fairly easily, we can go back to our code. Let's go to our app.js page where we have this logout logic happening. And here we go. So Looks like we're logging something here with the success. But so when the logout successfully happened, well, we can just leverage our router here. Just say this dot router, navigate to route, and again, we can just send them home at this point. I think that's pretty reasonable. In some applications, you might want to have a page that specifically exists for logging out. That's perfectly fine too. But this should do the trick. So let's log in as Jane Doe. Let's go back to my second post and edit it and click log out. And here we go. We are taken right back to the home page. So at least from a front end perspective, our application is starting to feel pretty locked down. What I will say, and I want to really keep reinforcing this notion, is that you cannot secure your application from the front end. You can do your best to make the user experience really seamless and really good for your user, but anybody with malicious intent and a reasonable amount of programming knowledge will know how to kind of circumvent any logic, any routing logic, or any pipeline logic that you have on your front end. So you must secure your back end. That is absolutely your best line of defense. And so, you know, foundationally speaking, please do not try to use the authorized step. Please don't use pipelines as a means and the only means to secure your application. So that diatribe aside, thanks for joining me for this episode, and I'll talk to you next time.